And one of the things that really struck out that Robert wrote says that when he graduated high school, the last thing he wanted to do was be a farmer. So he pursued biochemical research, also at CU Boulder. And this is the thing that jumped out at me. He says he found the research atmosphere to be exhilarating, but also too political. So he decided that he'd start working in water resources and water policy, which of course is anything but political. And then before he came to that decision, he taught skiing in Steamboat Springs, opened 2 restaurants in Los Angeles, so he's been a pretty busy guy. In 1989, he trekked back to the farm where he and his family grow some of the best vegetables in the country. And he's a pretty modest guy, so I'll go ahead and brag for him a little bit and say he was appointed to the Agricultural Groundwater Advisory Board in 1991, served in that capacity 21 years, was appointed by Governor Romer, the Colorado Water Quality Control Commission, in 1997. So he comes today representing the perspective of the Colorado Ag Water Alliance, which you helped to form, I believe, in 2006. So go ahead and give it up for Robert.
Great, thanks very much, Barry. Thank you. Well, first off, I want to find out how many Bronco fans we have here. So if you could raise your hand if you're a Bronco fan. Great, thank you. Well, I thought it was appropriate that we're talking about tributaries of change. And if you have time, really take a look at those posters along the side, because I think it's very insightful, those artists that develop those pictures. Tributaries of change. You know, change is always very difficult. We're always want to be more comfortable staying with where we were at. That's kind of why I always stayed in the back while the other 2 presenters were talking, was that we feel uncomfortable with change. I think, you know, the Broncos felt this last year. Of course, I was a big Tim Tebow fan, so I was sorry to see him go. But I converted over to Peyton Manning. And change is difficult. I mean, a lot of people rebelled with that change. But change doesn't always mean things will be different either. I mean, if you compare the 2 seasons, how would you compare these last 2 seasons? Well, you figure when Tim Tebow was quarterback, the season ended, and then Tim went down on 1 knee. This year, Peyton Manning went down on 1 knee, and the season ended. So anyway, even though we change, sometimes the results don't change. So what do? We need to keep changing and keep trying to change things. Well, you know, farmers, and I am a vegetable farmer now, unfortunately with my parents in Brighton, Colorado. And farmers, as you know, well, let me see here, how many farmers do we have in the audience? Please raise your hand. That's just about right. You know, it's about less than 2% of the population that are farmers now. And we're a little bit hesitant to change, even though we're really used to change. I mean, you talk about the weather changing every day. Aaron talked about the variability in climate. We deal with that on a daily basis. I go to work every morning, and I'm not too sure what I'm going to face for that day. But there's new changes that are facing us in agriculture now. You know, it used to be when we talked about water rights and farming, the old theory was a shovel and a shotgun. That's how we determined where water was going to go. Now on the ditch systems that I'm on, you know, a lot of the ditch systems, the majority of ownership is now by municipalities. So no longer is it the shovel and the shotgun. Now we have this complicated SCADA-controlled Rubicon gate, you know, looking at volumetric limits down the ditch, and here you have me as this little farmer in the ditch board going, what? I just want my water to grow my crops. And so change is very difficult. And that's part of why the reason is, as you know, the roundtable process started up, and I actually volunteered to be a part of the Metro Roundtable. I could have gone and participated in the South Platte Roundtable, but I thought, you know what, it would be important for me to have a better understanding of what the municipalities are looking at. Instead of just, our farm is right downstream of Denver, starts in the city of Brighton, and oftentimes when I went into that Metro Roundtable meeting, I felt like there was a target on my back having water rights. And so, you know, it's that old saying of keep your enemies close and know who they are. I thought, you know, it's better for me to be a part of the Metro Roundtable than it would be necessarily the South Platte Roundtable. But from that experience, well, I guess I'm going to ask, now I'm going to keep your arms busy if you don't mind. How many people know what the Colorado Ag Water Alliance is? Raise your hand. Just a few. Very good. Well, the Colorado Ag Water Alliance, or CAWA as we refer to it now, is loosely formed, as Perry said, back in 2006. You know, along the South Platte River, we had a lot of conversations among agricultural producers dealing with the alluvial groundwater wells and senior surface water right holders. And also we had already been in the Basin Roundtable process for a while. And a few of us got together and said, you know what, it would be important for us agricultural producers, especially since we're less than 2% of the population, to really have communication among ourselves within the state. You know, instead of isolated in each basin, let's talk to each other. I mean, of course there's differences in each basin, but there's similarities and there's issues that we can share and talk together about. And so we formed this group of agricultural producers to talk about water. Currently, it's organized under the auspices of the Colorado Ag Council. Does anybody here know what the Ag Council is? A few? Good. Well, this will be great. The Colorado Ag Council, again, the Colorado Ag Council, what that is the formation, you know, in the state of Colorado, we have a lot of different farm organizations. We have Colorado Farm Bureau, Rocky Mountain Farmers Union, we've got the Potato Association, Sugar Beet Growers. I'm a member of the Colorado Onion Association. I would like to remind you how healthy onions are, so you should eat more onions. Okay, I got that plug in. But we have all these farm organizations in the state, and yet less than 2% of the population are farmers. We really came to our senses and said, you know what, instead of all of our organizations fighting against each other for membership, it's really time that we start to talk and communicate with each other. There's so many of these issues, whether they're happening at the state capitol or at the national level, it really behooves us to really communicate together. So we formed what was called the Colorado Ag Council. What this essentially is the collection of about 30 farm organizations of the state. We meet every other week in the basement of the Capitol. The legislators have really found it valuable. You know, they can come to the Colorado Ag Council and instantly they've had communication with 20 of the ag groups in the state. And then also we meet about 3 times the rest of the year. Well, it was a perfect umbrella organization to help CAWA get off its feet. About CAWA, we can kind of read, CAWA's goal is to empower agricultural stakeholders to make the most informed and viable decisions regarding Colorado agriculture. Again, it was just a way for us to really open up communication with our brethren in the West Slope or down here in the South, up in the South Platte or here in the Arkansas Basin. CAWA's role is to serve an information exchange between both agriculture and non-agricultural audiences, to provide education to water stakeholders about irrigated agriculture in Colorado, to be an advocate for agricultural sector, and to identify common ground between participating organizations. These are some of the member organizations of CAWA right now. So you can see it's a wide variety of list, and just recently Rocky Ford Growers Association joined us. But you can see it's a wide variety. It's everything from the green industry, you know, which represents horticultural landscapers, from the corn growers. So we have a wide variety of participation and input. Just this past year, it got complicated to the point, you know, we were meeting and talking. We had several water summits which were very popular. We had one in Loveland, was it in 2011? We had over 500 participants, very popular. Well, we got to the point we needed an operational doctrine, so we actually approved that this past year. But the main thing that came out of that was that we really wanted it to stay an agricultural producer-led organization. We didn't want our, you know, most of the farm organizations, whether it's Colorado Farm Bureau, Rocky Mountain Farmers Union, they have paid staff, which assist us. But really, we wanted to keep CAWA led by producers, and so that's written into our doctrine, that it is the producers that are participating in this. So we set up 3 membership classifications. Of course, I just talked about the voting producer member. And again, we stress that those people had to be actual producers. So I'm actually a producer. I don't get paid by CAWA to participate or do anything. And I'm representing the Colorado Onion Association. And I have to brag a little bit. And not only are onions healthy for you, and another reason actually that I wore the Bronco jersey is that recently I was made the front cover of a national magazine. Onion World. I'm sure you all got Onion World, right? But anyway, so I participate representing the Colorado onions growers of the Colorado. But then we also, after our 2011 summit, we actually had municipalities coming up to us. We had other organizations that are not directly related to agricultural production saying, you know, we'd like to become a member of CAWA, be involved in your conversations. And so we just this past year, we've added that supporting non-voting membership. Well, they're supporting our efforts and yet involved in the discussion, but they're not necessarily voting. They can't vote in anything that we talk about. And then we have non-voting officio members, which are our partners like the Colorado Water Institute, Department of Ag, who are important partners in all this. We talk about position taking, and I think this is real important because a lot of people come up to me or come up to our executive committee and go, what's CAWA's position on this? What's CAWA's position on this bill or this legislative piece? Really, that's not our goal. Really, we're hesitant from taking positions on things, again, because we want to keep those doors open for communication. But if, for some reason, if there is an issue out there that we really feel it's important for CAWA to take a position on, we will, but it has to be unanimous for all the members. Again, I talked about the educational outreach efforts that we've had, which has been our main key focus. And then if you go to our website, which I'll show you on the end, one of our major white papers that we've produced now is CAWA Water Principles. You know, there's so much conversation about ag water conservation and can that make up the gap and things like that. Well, some of these water principles really outline what CAWA's efforts are moving toward and how we feel that that is important for ag. You know, I have some copies of it later. If you'd like to see some of them, just come up to get me. But I'm not going to run through these now. There's 7 of them altogether. Current projects, luckily, Perry has just come to the Colorado Ag Water Alliance and asked if we would partner with the Arkansas Water Basin to work on this value of ag water project. Because that was been always one of the topics that we talked about at CAWA, is that, you know what, when people talk about agriculture using all this water, in reality, a lot of that water is going right back to the city and the food that we provide. You know, how can we value part of that? And as James said, what's the value of that water staying in there, of the benefits that other people are getting? You know, as we deal with this drought, we talked about water quality. Another thing, James, you might consider is that, you know, in the past, it's been the solution to pollution has been dilution. I mean, as those stream flows are getting less, it's making harder for some of that effluent treatment to meet those guidelines. Is there a value again for that we can assign? Ag water conservation, again, a big point. There was a bill in this past state legislature that they looked at that. CAWA really wants to investigate that, potentially going to coordinate a facilitated dialogue about that, to look at the opportunities, the constraints, and the misconceptions about ag water conservation. We want to hold another ag summit someplace in the state. We're really looking to partner with somebody. We may partner with the Interbasin Compact Committee, depending on their schedule. But that's the best way that we feel like we can really further that conversation, is really by finding a partner to go forward with some of these things. Water Congress has just added a new seat to their board of directors, an agricultural seat, and so we hope to be a part of that process. And then also looking for 2 basin tours that we can do. Well, the future of Colorado water and agriculture. Real quickly, you know, that visually you can look at this map and you can see that the lighter green areas, that's irrigated crops. So you look at the whole state, really, you know, there's only about, I think it's about 4% of the acres of the state are really actually irrigated crops. This would reflect those numbers. Total land area about 66,300,000, and the irrigated cropland is only 2,600,000. Average farm size is about 864 acres. Colorado ag products. Todd, you mentioned this. This is the order, the economic value to the state. Cattle being number 1, dairy working all the way down. Unfortunately, onions were not up there, but they're really healthy for you, so you should eat more onions. But I think what also gets lost, and you don't see this too much, is that among all the United States, the commodities raised or grown in the state of Colorado, we rank very high, usually in the top 10 within production of the U.S. I didn't know this until I looked at the ag stats. Pro-sow millet, we rank 1st in the United States. I was surprised. Market sheep is 2nd. 3rd for all sheep. 4th ranking among all states in the United States, barley, potatoes, sorghum, grain, sunflower, cantaloupe. We rank 4th across the United States. Wool, 5th in winter wheat. 6th is onions. Yes, so Colorado ranks 6th in onions. Did I mention that I made the cover of a magazine? All right. 7th is cabbage and sweet corn. We grow both of those, so I help contribute to that. 8th is beans, sugar beets, peaches. 9th is land in farms. So we have a pretty high number of land and farms compared to the rest of the United States. So hopefully then again, we're helping the state by exporting our product and bringing funds in. And 10th is hay, alfalfa, cattle, calves, and average farm size. Agriculture and jobs. Colorado's agriculture and food industry supports more than 100,000 jobs in Colorado. That's 4% of all Colorado jobs. That's not taking into account that multiplier effect. 43,000 in production, 13,500 in inputs and suppliers, and 50,400 in processing and marketing. Approximately 30,000 are in non-rural Colorado. So it goes to show that many of the Colorado counties are ag dependent. In more than half of Colorado counties, 1 in every 10 jobs is tied to the ag and food industry. Irrigated crops, just a kind of a breakdown of the crops grown on irrigated lands. Irrigation methods in the U.S. and Colorado, as compared to U.S. totals, we're pretty high in surface irrigation. Sprinkler irrigation is increasing rapidly, and drip is a very small percentage, but also increasing. Ag-dependent counties, that goes back to see, the red are those counties that are highly dependent on ag. You can see a lot of our eastern part of the state is dependent on ag. Just looking at the picture from the total U.S. perspective, this irrigated agriculture is very significant. 400 million acres of total crops, 56 million irrigated acres, approximately 100 billion in total crop receipts. Agriculture currently consumes over 70% of total freshwater diverted, and 15% of total U.S. crops are irrigated, and producing almost half of the total crop value. And yet, as was mentioned earlier, because of the gains in efficiency of irrigation methods, U.S. farmers today use 15% less total water than they did in 1980, and yet produce 70% more food. And we've seen this day, I think this might have been in the earlier Swazi reports, really agriculture remains the dominant water user. And the challenges, as has been mentioned before, 30 years ago, Colorado's population was 2 million. 3 of Colorado's 4 basins were under-appropriated, and it was an area of water abundance. Today, Colorado's population is approximately 5.2 million, and 3 of our 4 basins are over-appropriated. And we are now in an era of water scarcity and trade-offs. So recognizing there's pressure to transfer agricultural water to medicinal and industrial uses and other uses, are there viable alternatives? These are some of the ones that were mentioned before. Rather than buy and dry, rotational fallowing, alternative cropping, purchasing leaseback and renewable supplies, water banks, conservation easements, use of stored or wet supplies. I think this was also in Swazi, and people have seen this graph before, where it's really indicates, the printing's kind of small, but it indicates by 2050 what the estimated loss of acreage, irrigated acreage, is going to be. How much time do I have left, Mr.? Keep going, okay.
No, you want to, about a couple minutes.
Okay, well, I'm very visual, and so I always like, numbers are nice. Sorry, James, I appreciate numbers, but I like pictures. And so, when you say 20% of irrigated land, we're likely to lose that by 2050, I talked to Perry and I said, what are you going to have about 120 people here today? And this chart says that in 50 years, our population is going to double. Why don't I invite another 120 people to the conference and then take 20% of the food away and see what happens? Well, he wouldn't agree to that analogy, so I thought I'd use a different analogy here. And so now I'm going to have some audience participation. Dick, I'm sorry I didn't warn you ahead of time, but I'd like you gentlemen at this table to stand up. If you wouldn't mind standing up, John, and also Don and Diane, stand up. All right, so these people standing up here are representing our current population in Colorado, of about 5 million people. Now, what I'm going to do, pass out these hats, 1 hat to each person. And if you kind of look at, us farmers, we get free hats all the time. I finally found a use for the free hats. But anyway, these are hats. These are hats from seed salesmen, from tractor companies, from one was from a sprinkler irrigation company. These are hats, and these hats represent now irrigated agriculture. So each of these person gets gets a hat. Now that represents irrigated agriculture today. Now what I'm going to do, we're going to scroll to 2050, and now I'd like everybody at this table to stand up. All you folks down here wouldn't mind standing up? Hold it. No, because you know what's going to happen? Now this is the population of 2050. Not only are we increasing the population, but sorry. No, sorry. We've just cut back irrigated acres by 20%. No matter how much Diane wanted that hat, I'm sorry, we've cut it back. It's thank you everybody for helping me with that. And you can sit down. But I think that's why, I mean, from my standpoint, that's why it's really important to look at these alternatives. How can we keep water in agriculture? Agriculture to urban transfers. You know, it's broader than just the rural economic issues. It's more than just water. It's about sustaining rural economy and lifestyle. It's about managing change that will come. Again, tributaries to change. I thought that was an appropriate title. It's managing those changes. On our operation, we no longer grow broccoli because we don't have the water in order to raise that crop. We reduce some of our vegetable production. We're growing feed barley now. We're growing dryland wheat. The change is difficult. It's very, very difficult to do. We have I think the Greeley Tribune yesterday reported on Harry Strohauer saying that he's moving a lot of his operation to Mexico. And he said, you know what? It's easier for me to haul my equipment and to travel back and forth to New Mexico than it is to deal with some of these Colorado water laws. And that's what's happening right now. We're having farmers choose to call from who? We're having farmers move out of the state. Was that a call if somebody wanted to buy my water? But we're having, there's a lot of demand for agricultural water. So the future isn't certain. How much water from agriculture is available to meet future urban and environmental water needs? How can we meet growing future food needs with less water? The future for ag is uncertain. The agricultural water gap is growing. Not necessarily because irrigated agricultural acres are increasing, but that gap is growing, one, because ag to municipal and industrial transfers are occurring. Two, reduction in M&I water availability to agriculture. We're seeing that this year where we were being able to use some of the waters, that extra water that cities had, and this year they were forecasting that water was no longer going to be available. And three, something that you really don't hear a lot of talk about is the reduction in yields of historic water rights. I think we've seen this on our farm. That, as Denver metro area is driven to reuse more of their Trans Mountain diversion water, really the net effect is to reduce the yields of some of our shares of water that we've had. And that's why we have no longer been able to grow some of the water-intensive crops than we were able to in the past. Even though we haven't sold any of our shares, we're actually seeing less water for those shares. By the way, that picture, that's me planting onions. That's not normally the way I do it, by the way. That's high tech, yeah. So you know what? We do face a lot of challenges. We must increase food productivity by using the same? Probably not, but by using less water. Developing new cropping varieties and cropping systems. CSU plays a major role in this. Developing ag enterprises that are resilient to uncertain water supplies, maybe some of that flex water marketing, transitioning to dry land or limited irrigation strategies, improving agricultural water management institutions, policies, and organizations. And what do I mean by that? It sounds nice, but what do I mean by that? The reason that we haven't personally converted a lot more to drip, which is more efficient, is because some of those delivery systems or those institutions don't make that type of system operate very well. And so there's certain hurdles there for us to overcome in order to use those systems. And so that's it. Thank you very much.